We'll get to your calls in just a second, but I want to bring in Fran Townsend, former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor from 2004 to 2008. Fran Townsend, we're playing the President's remarks. He mentioned there that he had met with his Homeland Security and National Security advisors yesterday in the wake of that incident. What's the top priority in that meeting? What's the biggest unanswered question that those federal officials are going through there?
I think it's fair to assume that the President's, regardless of who it is, this president or a prior president, the first question the President of the United States asks his team is, what could we have this? What are we not doing that we should be doing or could be doing to prevent the next Orlando, the next San Bernardino? I think part of the answer to that question is going to be one of resources. Director Comey has said repeatedly he's got terrorism investigations in all of the 50 states, and he doesn't have the resources to cover all of those threats and investigations equally. I think what we've been told is that they can only cover, in terms of 24/7, about somewhere between 45 and 50 of those. And so there's certainly a resource issue. The second question is, while the FBI obviously operates under the Constitution and the laws of the United States, are there internal Justice Department guidelines, like the Attorney General guidelines, that restrict them from looking at material when they're making judgments about which threats are aspirational, that is, people who are just talking about it, versus threats that are operational. When this guy, Mateen, who had been on the FBI's radar, went and bought the assault rifle and pistol a week ago, that was an indication that he was turning from aspirational to operational. And so you want to make sure that the investigators have the tools they need to be able to pick up that change and to act on it.
When you talk about that change from inspiration to aspirations, how much are they going to go back to review those meetings that reportedly took place with the FBI and the attacker back in 2013 and 2014? What sort of clues will they be looking for in there that they obviously missed at that time?
It's interesting because the head of the FBI office in the Orlando area said they have gone back and they have looked at those files. And based on what they knew at that time, they don't believe that they missed anything. He was sort of a blowhard. He was talking about support. There was nothing, we have a First Amendment in this country. People can say all sorts of offensive things. And so that wasn't enough for them. They will certainly look at the later interview in 2014 where he had contact with an American suicide bomber in Syria, although they've said to us, going back and looking at that file, that it was minimal contact. I think internally they are certainly going to have to decide whether or not that judgment that the contact with the suicide bomber was only minimal was a correct judgment, or could they and should they have done more to understand that relationship.
We're talking with Fran Townsend, a Deputy National Security Advisor for Combating Terrorism back in 2003 and 2004, former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor through 2008, currently works as Executive Vice President for Worldwide Government, Legal and Business Affairs at McAndrews and Forbes Incorporated. Before we let you go, I know you have to run off soon for another interview, but these lone wolf attacks, Fran Townsend, how can this country better defend against these type of attacks?
Very difficult. Look, it is these self-radicalized lone wolves provide many fewer opportunities for law enforcement to disrupt that cycle of radicalization to violence. I do think it requires communities and families to be alert and to look for signs that someone is moving down a spectrum towards violence. And, our law enforcement officers are only as good as the communities that support them. And so without the help of the general public, we're not going to beat this. Regrettably, I think you're likely to see more of these types of attacks, but it's really important that community leaders and communities work with their local law enforcement, because that's where these tragedies happen, and that's where they're sort of the last line of defense is.
Fran Townsend, thanks so much for your time this morning on the Washington Journal.
Thank you.
And we're